Running fans, jumping fans, throwing fans, all around athletics fans, welcome to Talking in Ovals. I am Alex Cuesta. He over there is Dave Hyatt. What's going on, brother?
I feel like it's the official start of cross country when we have the short coaches meet. I feel like it's finally going now. First race at Homedale Park, and it did not disappoint. It doesn't matter if it was wet, rainy. These kids now are unbelievable, and we are seeing just incredible times. A lot of it led by some of our former guests and some of my college friends.
And we'll talk about some other times because our good buddy Coach Tefalski providing us with some Westfield PRs, but that'll be in a minute. I do think it's awesome too because we see back-to-back weeks, two of the hardest courses in the Northeast between Bowdoin and Homedale, obviously voted hardest course in the country, with ridiculously good times early this season. So
bad weather too.
And bad weather. So before we get going on, today's episode 53, Monday, October 2nd. Yes, we are into October of 2023. And if you like what you hear from us, give us a like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5-star Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go look for us on the socials at Talking in Oval. So last week's show.
53. This is episode 58.
58. Did I say 53?
You did.
I mean, the 8
kind of on a short like, 5.
The 8 kind of looks like a 3, I guess. I don't know. But I'm wearing glasses for no reason, apparently. So episode 58. But last week's show, just want to talk about it real quick. We had a blast talking to Wonder Twins, Ed and Jorge Torres. It was lots of fun just, hearing the sibling rivalry, the brotherly love, and just the amazing careers that both of those gentlemen had. And really fun. Go back and give that episode a listen. It was lots of fun. So let's jump in really quick to the PRs. Dave, Coach Tefalski and Westfield continues.
They are rolling.
They're rolling, and right now they have to be the top public school to beat right now. Like in New Jersey, they're planting their flag as one of the top public schools, if not the top public school right now.
They have the top, you're going to say it in a second, the top public school average in the history of New Jersey at Homedale Park.
Yeah. So let's just run down PRs. So you had a good day when your whole varsity squad gets PRs at Homedale. So give a shout out. Avery Keith, 1556 over there. Eamon Mason, 1603. Ryan Daly, 1609. Jimmy Gildea, 1612. Graham Corin, 1626. Tej Meta, 1627, and Alex Valencia, 1646. They scored 41 points, second overall, 1608 average, which is a Westfield record. And, their last guy finished 20th. There was 171 competitors. So, I mean, incredible job. Coach Tefalski's doing awesome. The boys over there are doing amazing. So,
yeah. Shout out to CBA, for winning it and averaging under 16 minutes. I mean, it's unreal. And I know Coach Tefalski and Coach McCafferty are really good friends, so it's great to have that rivalry ruined for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and and even though CBA has bested them 2 weeks in a row, don't think they don't know who they are, and don't think they don't know if they don't come and bring it every single meet that Westfield's involved, there's a good chance that Westfield can overtake them. So it's awesome. It's a cool rivalry brewing there. But I want to talk, first off, send us your PRs, okay? Coach Tefalski's doing a great job. We've had on plenty of other coaches. We know you guys listen. Let's go. But number 2, let's get to this week's episode, because this week's episode, we have, as we always do, another awesome guest. And, as Dave has been doing this whole entire, podcast, pulling his weight 100% more than I am, getting us amazing guests. So this week, we have Mike Mulqueen. He is the former and now retired head track and field coach and cross-country coach from Rutgers. Coach, what's up?
Hello, guys. Hey, nice. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We are, we're pumped to have you on. And, I love talking to all, the collegiate coaches and everything, because you guys, especially the ones that have so much experience, the insight that you guys have into the sport, it is a great thing. And, I'm a Jersey boy. I ran over at Manchester Township. Obviously, Dave was at Toms River. So it's always great to hear about Rutgers because I root for Rutgers and everything like that. So I want to jump right into it.
Alex, I'm sorry. Were you at Manchester with Kevin Hester?
Kevin Hester is older than I am. I was class of 2007, right?
Okay. Oh, okay. He's much older. Yeah.
No, was I 04? Yeah, 07. I was 07. Yeah, Kevin Hester is much older. I was 07. I'm a little bit younger than Ian Hahn, who we had on the show as well. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yep.
So I want to jump right in, and I want to ask you, Coach McQueen, When did you get the spark to become a runner? Because you were a runner before you were a coach. When was it? What was it that made you sit there and go, you know what? I could be a runner my whole life. I could do this.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I went our grammar school, Lady Peace Grammar School in Fords. All the Catholic grammar schools, excuse me, always had a big track meet, and a lot of us did that in 7th grade and 8th grade. And I went to St. Joe's Metuchen, and I wanted to continue running. I just love the sport. I love baseball, but my friends were running, and I just really, really liked the sport, and excuse me. And but what happened is I hadn't started to grow yet. So when I first started out, I was really, really bad. My my best freshman 400 time was 68.7, and I ran it on a relay leg. And but there's just something about the sport that I really liked. And then my sophomore year, I started to grow and get a little taller. And one day I was just fooling around. We ran the low hurdles back then. We ran the high hurdles and the lows. The intermediates weren't in the events at the time. And I was just bouncing over the low hurdles. And the coach at the time, John Mitsopoulos, he said, hey, you look pretty good. Why don't you try the low hurdles? So I started to run them. And excuse me, I placed in one meet. I placed in the Catholic Conference Sophomore Championships. I placed 5th. And I got a point for the team. So that was really exciting to me. And then I started gravitating to the high hurdles. So by the end of my senior year, we had hurdle relays that, we ran the 5th fastest time in the country. We ran 59.8, wow, which back in 1972 was the 5th fastest time in the country.
It's the fastest time.
I was a member of that team. And then it was interesting. Well, we ran the highs and lows. So when I went to Manhattan College, with Coach Dwyer and Coach Gagliano, I just didn't have the leg speed to be you could get by with it in high school, but not in college. So they said, listen, you're going to have to train like a half miler, and you're going to have to run the 400-meter hurdles. So that's how I gravitated to the 400-meter hurdles, because I didn't have a lot of speed, but I could get really strong by training with the half milers. So then I gravitated to the 400-meter hurdles. And then I ran those
really quick. What was that like? Because a lot of the short sprinters,
big transition.
a lot of the guys that like to do that don't necessarily like to get told, like, hey, you were really good at, doing the shorter stuff in high school. Now we want you to train like a half miler. Now we want you to go on hard 3, 4, 5, 6 mile runs. Now we want you to do these types of things. And it's kind of like, wait a minute. I just like to sprint really fast and be done in whatever, time. What was that like for you being told now at a collegiate level as well? We got to make this hard transition here.
Well, it wasn't that difficult because I wasn't really, really fast. I had good, for the high school highs, I had good technique. I wasn't blazing fast, but I was, a really solid member of that relay team that, won a bunch of things. But I realized that if I wanted to be successful at Manhattan College. You understand, when I was at Manhattan College, my teammates were Joe Savage, Mike Keogh, Tony Colon,
wow,
Marty Walsh, then Billy Chalise out of Roseau Catholic, Bobby Jones, Vinny Campy. The names. Matt Sensuitz was a freshman when I was a sophomore. So Chris Inman, Harry Kronick, great New Jersey names. So if I wanted to be a part of that team and try to score points for the team, Coach Dwyer and Coach Gag said, listen, we think you can help us with the intermediate hurdles, but you're going to have to do this. And I bought into it, and it wasn't easy at first, but I grew to really, really like it. I liked doing those workouts. I liked doing the workouts at Van Cortlandt Park on the hills, just because I knew if I was going to try to be competitive, I had to try to get as strong as I could. I couldn't run 45 or 46 or 47 seconds for a quarter. So I embraced it. I kind of went the other way, where I really believed in Coach Dwyer and Coach Gag, and I just really believed in what I was doing, and my teammates were very helpful. So it wasn't really hard for me to do it because it was the only way I was going to try to help the team and be successful there.
And it's not like Coach Gag or Dwyer actually asked people to do anything. It was kind of like, this is what you're going to do. I remember watching Gag coach at Georgetown.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of, we think it'd be best. No
negotiations.
This is what you're going to do.
It was strongly suggested in a very professional way. And I thought it was great, So, and it was the best thing that I could have done.
So what did your your PB end up being over at Manhattan for the 400 hurdles?
I ran 53 over the 400-meter hurdles.
It's really, and it's always funny. It's like we have a lot of fast people on here, and most people are like, it's not that fast. But it's like, it's pretty, 53 is pretty damn fast.
Actually, like
at that time,
and it was cinder.
We ran a lot on cinder tracks, and at that time, 53 was competitive. Back then we ran a lot of dual meets were very important back then. We had dual meets with Army, dual meets with Navy, dual meets with Cornell, UConn. Manhattan would have a triangular meet with Columbia and Rutgers. So, and you could qualify for the IC4As, the Metropolitan meet, the NCAs, back then 53 could place in a lot of meets.
Absolutely.
And on the tracks we ran in, and plus you got to understand too, it's interesting back then, we didn't have all the conferences that you have now. Our big thing is we had the Metropolitan Championships. Then you tried to qualify for the IC4As, and then you tried to qualify for the NCAs.
Yep.
Which I never did. But so you didn't have the Big East, you didn't have the American, you didn't have the MAC, you didn't have the Northeast Conference. So those were your three big meets, and you had a lot of dual meets and triangular meets around them. So 53 would score a fair amount of points, and I could be productive on the team. I wasn't at the level of a Joe Savage or Mike Keogh or Tony Colon and Pete Squires and those guys, but
not many people were.
I know. I was able to help out and contribute, which was really important.
And I'm one of the people that, I disagree with a lot of people on here. I like dual meets. I always enjoy dual meets. And I know a lot of the coaches we talked to on here, they all disagree with me. They're like, it's a waste of time. I mean, I enjoyed the competitive nature of going up against one team and, being able to just treat it as like a glorified workout half the time, which was fun. It was fine. But it was like, I like the competitive nature of being able to go against one team and beat them. Like, that was a good time. I know a lot of people disagree.
I always liked them too, because you could compete a lot of your athletes, in a dual meet or a triangular meet, and a lot of athletes that may not get to some of the championship meets could score points and earn letters or whatever, and they could feel really productive for the team. And then what hurt that is, as I started coaching, when the NCAA put a limit as to how many meets you could compete in, that's kind of hindered a lot of the dual meets, because coaches and wanted to go to faster tracks and they wanted to go to better facilities and bigger meets, because you had limitations as to how many meets you could go to. So instead of going to a slow, say, flat 200-meter track, everybody wanted to go to a faster 200-meter bank track. And so a lot of those dual meets kind of got pushed aside because of you had limitations as to how many meets you could go to. And if you weren't going to a good facility, but even though the competition might be great, you might not get some of the qualifying times you might get out of it. So unfortunately, some of those dual meets kind of, were pushed aside. And I mean, I love dual meets against Army and Navy. Even at Rutgers, we had great battles with Navy in dual meets down there. But unfortunately, like I said, a lot of those, you don't see them as much anymore because of a lot of the limitations from how many meets you can go to.
You basically get some of the classics. I think like Michigan and Ohio State might still do it. Some of the Ivies, I think, still do them just because it's like tradition. You get some that just like have that clash. But it's a very... It's taboo. It's out, and I feel like high school is going that way as well. Where like they're not wanting to do dual meets and stuff either. So,
I mean, Alex, I saw Tony Colon run 4:01.2 in a dual meet against Navy.
That's incredible.
In a dual meet.
Yeah.
So you could really get it going if you had the right people and the right meets but Army Navy, you still have like Princeton Navy still has their dual meets. But unfortunately, a lot of them, I'm repeating myself, but you don't see them as much. And I think that's a lost art in college running, because there's a lot to be said for the head-to-head competition.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I agree. So I want you to continue. So you get, you go through your collegiate time. You get done in collegiate. What makes you want to become a coach? Was that something that as you were going through college, you're seeing Coach Dwyer, Coach Gags, and you're just like, I want to influence young men and women and do the same thing that they were able to do?
Yeah, my degree, my degree at Manhattan is in English education, secondary English education. And when I was coming out of Manhattan College, Al McCafferty at the time was leaving St. Joe's Metuchen to go to Middletown South, I believe. And he talked to me because Brother Richard was going to be elevated from the freshman coach to the varsity coach at St. Joe's. So Al spoke to me about going to coach at. I'd worked a couple of camps and things, and we had talked, and he had talked to me about going to coach at St. Joe's, and I jumped at the chance because I went there, when I ran there, and I love St. Joe's, and so they hired me and Gary Trojanowski right out of college, me out of Manhattan College and Gary out of Villanova, to I was just turned 22 years old, to be Brother Richard's assistants when Al left to go to Middletown South. So what I did, I knew when I started with my education programs and student teaching and so on, I knew that one of the best avenues that could help me get an English job was to be a coach.
Yeah.
Because every interview I went on, one of the first things I said is, listen, I can coach. So you kill two birds with one stone. You get a coach and an English teacher.
Absolutely.
So my freshman year, St. Joe's did my first year out of college, St. Joe's didn't have an English position open at the time. So what I did is I drove from Ford's, New Jersey, where I grew up, to DePaul Catholic up in Wayne.
Oh, wow.
And I taught English there. Yep. And then I drove to St. Joe's to coach. And the St. Joe's kids would wait a little while for me to get there because DePaul got out a little bit later than St. Joe's. But then over that summer, and we were very fortunate. We had Vinnie Riley, we had Ivan Solero, we had Johnny Wavero. We won a bunch of county and state championships. And so after, after my first year of teaching, St. Joe's had an English opening for me.
Nice.
So I jumped at the chance. So from 77 to 81, I taught English and coached as an assistant with Brother Richard and Gary and Al Ernst and Jimmy Langdon at St. Joe's Metuchen. But at the same time, I was competing. It's interesting. I don't think you could do it now. But at the same time, I was training with the Athletic Attic out of Rutgers with a group of post-collegiates with Coach Gaggs. And so one day we were just talking, and I said, while I'm here, I'd love to try to help you with your hurdlers, because I was training with them anyway. So he said, he and Coach Wallach, God bless him, he said, well, why don't you? So they brought me on. I signed a volunteer contract. So what I was doing, I was teaching English at St. Joe's. I was coaching at St. Joe's. Then I would drive to Rutgers a couple days a week, not every day. And I would train with the Athletic Attic guys, and I would help coach the Rutgers hurdlers. So I did that for a couple of years, and then a full-time position opened up at Rutgers. And it was really, here I am coaching with, my closest friend to this day, Coach Gaggs, and I still talk, we still speak all the time. And so I had the opportunity to coach with him full-time. And St. Joe's was very, very nice. They said, listen, we wish you well. It's a great opportunity. Because what was happening is we had kids going to the national meets, Eugene Norman, Boris Pendergrass, and I couldn't go because I was teaching.
Yeah. And
in fact, when I was running with the Athletic Attic, I had to use it. We had a distance medley we were running, and I was thrilled. We won the distance. We won the club distance medley. I was a quarter leg, and I had to take a personal day from teaching in order to go and run.
Wow. And
I say I was very fortunate because Dave Reinhardt, great steeplechaser, led off. I ran the quarter leg. I handed off to Dennis Fikes, a 355 miler, handed off to Bobby Anastasio, who was a 358 miler. So yeah, I was very, very lucky to be with that group. But the point I'm trying to make is that St. Joe's was very, very gracious. And when I decided to leave teaching there, and I went and coached, and then I went to Rutgers full time in 1981. So that's how I got into the whole high school and college coaching.
I mean, that's awesome. And when you were, it's obvious that you were very, driven when you wanted something. It seems like once you decided that you wanted, to be a coach and everything, like you took every opportunity you could. And I think that that's a good lesson for, if we have any kids listening out there and you think you might want to be a coach, it's not just going to fall in your lap. Coaching is tough to get into. There are a lot of good coaches out there. So, you have to differentiate yourself. You have to work hard. You have to learn. You have to sit under people, and you have to, take notes from good coaches and things like that. So it's it's pretty cool to hear your story and to hear how you at least got
Alex,
to that.
Alex, you're right. I went from high school assistant coach to volunteer at Rutgers to part-time assistant to full-time assistant to head coach. So I went pretty much up every rung of the ladder you could step up. I did, and I've been asked at clinics and camps by college athletes, so on, how do you get into it? And I tell them, go to a local high school, volunteer. There's so many videos out there now and books and everything on the internet that there's so much knowledge out there now, and go to clinics, go to camps, and volunteer and just learn. And I mean, I was, for example, I remember my first years out of college, I was living at home trying to save some money. Back then, high school Catholic school teacher, we made $7,600 a year.
You were rich there, yeah.
We were rich, But I remember one night, it was a Sunday night, and I was home, and Coach Gags called and said, "Listen, I'm going to go to the office and do some recruiting. What are you doing?" I said, "I'll be in the office in 20 minutes," because I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn as much as I could. If I spoke at a clinic, I always stayed and listened to all the other clinicians. I went to 1983, Coach Gag worked it out with Coach Dellinger at Oregon, where I could go out and be a clinician at his running camp, and I would work with the hurdlers.
Nice.
More so because I wanted to learn more, gosh, I learned an awful lot out there. And so I was very fortunate from having from Brother Richard and Al McCafferty at St. Joe's. And I had a great hurdle coach at St. Joe's, Mr. Byrne, William Byrne. And then having Coach Dwyer and Coach Gag, I was very fortunate to be coached by and be influenced by so many great people. One of the best coaches I've ever come across is Al McCafferty.
Yeah, I mean, listen, those are all some absolute legends in the sport. So I mean, what great tutelage to have.
Yeah.
Them. So you're at Rutgers. At what point did Gag say that, like, we're going to hand you the reins and, I'm going to move on. So like, this is now yours and take it. And
yeah, it was, I guess over the summer of 1983, he was approached by, he was approached by Georgetown and Mr. Rienzo at Georgetown, great coach, great man, became the AD there. He has a track background. Dennis Canick, God bless him, legendary Roseville Catholic coach, was at Georgetown. Joe Lang, another legendary coach, was at Georgetown. And so they approached Coach Gag about going down to Georgetown. So in September of 1983, Coach Gag became head coach at Georgetown. And then I had to go through the whole interview process like anybody else. And then in November of 1983, I was named the head coach. Okay. So for those 2 months, I was, doing the job, after Coach Gag had left. And then right before the NCAA regional cross country, I was named the head coach. So November of 1983. So that's how it transpired. Coach Gag went to Georgetown, and I was elevated up for his spot.
So you start in 1983. Obviously, going from 83 and to your retirement, you have probably seen a lot of change in the sport. And track kind of took a bunch of changes with advancements in track, consistent advancements in shoes, and things just getting better and better in technology and how all that happened. What was it like as a coach, dealing with all of the constant changes that were going on in the sport at the top from your tenure?
Well, I think because you're dealing, I'm probably going to show my age here now, but because you're dealing with athletes who are 17, 18, 21, 22 years old, now they're 26, 27 years old, but you had to really roll with the punches, and you had to be very flexible, and you had to be open for change, and you had to be open for different opinions, different ideas, different approaches to things. I was in 5 different conferences.
I know that.
We had the Eastern 8.
What was it like to go from this conference to the East?
It was interesting. Yeah, I went from the Eastern 8 to the Atlantic 10 to the Big East, to the American Athletic, to the Big Ten. And everyone had its own different challenges. Everyone had its own strengths and weaknesses. So you really had to roll with it because your travel changed, your academic requirements changed in the sense of travel. You had to over the years, your academic advisors became more and more and more and more important, because of class schedules and practice times and traveling and going to meets and things like that. Then when the NCAA came in with the APR and graduation rates and all sorts of stuff. So you had to really be flexible and you had to really be willing to roll with the punches and keep an open mind the best you could. I mean, I still had my my values and my coaching philosophies and what I felt was most important, but you had to adjust. You had to adjust and like I said, you just had to kind of roll with it and do the best you could navigating all those changes.
So I'll talk about. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
So, which conference were you in the longest, and what was it like to have to coach against Gagliano and those great coaches over at Villanova and like all these legends of the sport year after year after? Because he's kind of your mentor, and here you are now, like he's your competition too. So like that had to be kind of a unique situation too.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Obviously, Coach Gag and I are very close. One of my closest friends is Joe Piani from Notre Dame. We're very, very close. In fact, it's kind of funny. We hosted the Big East Championship in 2011, I think it was, the last time we hosted it. And the night before the meet, Joe came over to our house and we all had dinner together.
It's awesome.
And the next day, we're trying to beat the hell out of each other at the track meet. But it was, I saw it. I was really flattered and I saw it as a real challenge to go up against Notre Dame, to go up against Marcus O'Sullivan at Villanova, who I really looked up to as an athlete, and who's just a wonderful, wonderful person, and
Providence, and Georgetown.
Pardon me?
You had
and to go up against Georgetown, Ray Tracy at Providence, and guys who were
UConn,
big, yeah, UConn, exactly, and we had great battles. We were second and third several times. We won it once, but we always felt it as I always took it as a real challenge, but it was a real privilege to compete against such legendary programs and legendary people. Ray Tracy at Providence, was a great one. Obviously, Marcus was a great one. Then. Obviously the reputations of a Notre Dame, Coach Gag, Georgetown, and I'll tell you a funny story. With myself and Coach Gag, we had a really, really, really good 2-mile relay team, and he had a really, really good 2-mile relay team, and this was towards his retirement, and he called me up and he said, "What's your order going to be?" And I said, "What's your order going to be?" So we arranged that we had the 2 fastest 2-mile relays going into the meet.
Okay.
And so we arranged we put the teams, we put our runners where we felt they'd be most competitive. And it came down to the last 40 or 50 meters, and they nipped us at the tape, like 7:25 to 7:26 or something. But
wow.
But it was great. There was great rivalry, but there was great competitiveness. But there was also a real camaraderie amongst all the coaches as well. I mean, the one thing I most miss about coaching is the camaraderie of all the other coaches, because you go to meets from the other schools, because you go to meets. And you see these guys every weekend. They become your friends. You have dinner with them, even though you're trying to beat them every weekend. You spend a lot of time with these coaches, and you get to know their wives, get to know my wife. But to answer your question, it was a lot of fun, and I really felt privileged to say, hey, we beat Villanova, for example, because when I think of Villanova, I think of Marty LaCourie and Dave Patrick and Larry James and Marcus, obviously, and all those great Villanova teams. And besides beating them at the time, I felt like we were kind of battling their traditions as well. The same as the Georgetowns, the same as the Providences, the same as the Notre Dames, and win, lose, or draw. I always really got excited for those meets because it was a real challenge, to go up against these legendary programs and legendary coaches.
And not only that, you were also trying to recruit the same kids because we know like that New Jersey is a hotbed for track. So a lot of those coaches would come into Jersey and really try to recruit the top guys there. Because if you get the top guys in Jersey, you're going to be a competitive team every year. So not only were you going against them,
especially the short conference, just going to throw that out there.
all of Jersey.
Well, back when you guys were in school, I did home visits with, I did a school visit with Chris Greer and Steve Geiger. I did a home visit with Matt Kalwinski. I did a home visit with,
probably Paul Smith.
The Great Brick Run. I did it with Smith as well.
Mike Rada?
Huh?
Mike Rada or
I didn't do
Scott Muillo.
Scott Muillo. I did a home visit with Scott Muillo.
Ian Blanchard.
And I did and with Ryan Blaney.
Yep, from
I spent a lot of time, and with Sean McCaffrey. I did a lot. Spent a lot of time.
You were in Ocean County for quite some time those last years because I went to high school with Greer and Geiger, and I remember going through like their whole recruiting process because I was 1 year younger. I mean, obviously Chris was more highly recruited because he was a Meet of Champs winner, but like Steve was just like such like a dark horse because he had so much like uncapped and untapped potential that he ended up running like a 150 in college.
Yeah, 150, 149.8 I think on the leg. But so I spent a lot of time, in Ocean County back in your days, and I always wanted to. You bring up a good point, Dave, that even when we joined the Big Ten, everybody said, oh, now you're going to have to fly to Iowa to recruit. Now you're going to have to fly to Michigan. I said, no, I don't want them to come here. The best kids we're going to recruit are going to be from New Jersey.
Long Island. Long Island has some good kids too.
Yeah, but I mean the New York metropolitan area.
Yeah.
But I forgot what the main. I was talking too much. I forgot the main question.
Recruiting from Jersey, basically.
Oh yeah. That was always my main priority. And there were several reasons. One was the kids were just great. And even going back after that, Dave Click's a great hurdler we have. New Jersey, Marquis Allen, great long jumper, New Jersey. Adam Burgo, great high jumper, New Jersey. Kevin Bostic. I mean, you can go on and on and on.
Monroe Kearns from
Monroe Kearns. I competed against him.
Monroe.
He was a year younger than me, and we became good buddies. He was at Jackson.
Yeah, Monroe ran 149. Had a great career with us. And
you had Will's kid, the kid from South Brunswick who ran like a 150 in high school.
Yeah.
I have the privilege of saying that when I won the county in the conference, I got to beat Monroe in Jersey. So that's my the last time I beat him was my junior year. He ended up whooping my butt senior year.
he was very, very tough. Very tough.
He was awesome. Such a good kid.
One of the nicest kids you'll ever meet in your life. Wonderful kid.
Yeah.
Well, to me, he's a kid. He's a man now. But the philosophy was to try to recruit New Jersey as best you can, because besides the fact that they were just great kids, in terms of athletes, with Rutgers, with the cost of Rutgers, any financial aid or any track scholarship aid they could get would really make it very attractive to the kids compared to what some of the other schools might cost them.
Especially
and in-state, exactly. And most of the years I was there, I didn't have the full limit of scholarships. So we had to piece together. I worked very closely with financial aid. I worked very closely with the people there because, we were working with limited scholarship money, and the Pell grants and the Rutgers assistance grants and all those came in very, very handy when you're trying to package someone from New Jersey, to come to Rutgers. So that was a big plus. The fact that the room board tuition fees for in-state was so much less compared to what the other schools that they were being recruited by, would cost. So there were a couple of layers to the recruiting the New Jersey athletes.
So I have a question for you, because when I was there, I didn't run there alone, maybe like 1 or 2 years, but the football team was not very good. And then all of a sudden, did you see a boost in interest when like Shiano got there and they were third or fourth in the whole country? Did that help? Because you always hear kids like, even for other sports, want to go like where the football team is good. So did you notice any increase in interest once that whole thing happened?
Yeah, I did, because, and as you guys know, we're not on TV every weekend like football is or basketball is. And when they started doing really well, excuse me, pardon me, they were doing really well and they were on TV and they were going to bowl games and they were in all the newspapers and stuff. It definitely sparked an interest because, I had a couple of recruits tell me, because if someone was recruits, we'd always take them to a football game or we'd take them to a basketball game. So they get to see the school spirit and they get to, see what it's like and go in the dorms and so on. And that atmosphere really, really helped. In fact, it was a funny story. Rutgers upset Villanova in the basketball game at the RAC one night. And I forget who the big star was for Rutgers.
Was that Quincy Doobie back in the day? Quincy Doobie.
It may have been him.
Oh, it was Quincy.
And I remember I saw him the next day at the RAC. I saw him the next day at the RAC. And I said, Quincy, come here for a second. I think it was him, but so I called the play. I called the player over and I said, a great game last night. He said, thank you. I said, I owe you one. He said, what do you mean? I said, you just got us 3 recruits last night. Because they love the atmosphere. They love the atmosphere of the RAC. And so, but with football, Dave, to answer your question, yes, I did notice that the more notoriety that they got, when you call the recruit, hey, I saw them on TV last week or whatever. So it did give a boost, yes.
And there was nothing better than seeing a basketball game at the RAC. That place is electric. It's a fun atmosphere. Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. I loved hearing you talk about like the coaches' camaraderie because I was like fortunate enough that I went back to my alma mater, Marist, and Coach Kaliza over there was, friendly enough to bring me on as a volunteer for 2 years and then pay me for 2 years. But one of the coolest things I experienced was going to some of these meets, going to the hotels, and Coach Chuck Williams was also there. And Chuck would come and knock on the door and say, hey, we're going to go hang out with some coaches. You want to come? And it was fun because you had like a group of coaches that you became super friendly with, and you saw each other at meets. And, you talked about the meets, but you talked about more than that. You talked about, each other's lives and things. And it is different. And I feel like it's different than high school because in high school, you don't go to those meets and stay at the hotels with the same coaches and all those things. So it was really cool hearing you talk about, that camaraderie because for the short time I was there, I felt it. And I was, fortunate enough we were able to get Coach Ricardo Santos to come on the show because he was at Iona while I was still coaching at Marist and competing there. And, it was really cool to be able to still keep that pipeline there. Now, I was curious. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just saying, like, coaching in the same place, in the same state for so long, how important and were you able to forge relationships with high school coaches and high school programs so that if like you would call, they would just be like, all right, they would recommend maybe that their athlete go there because you had a relationship with those high school coaches?
Yeah, Dave, you're breaking up there, but I could hear you. I think it was important. You try to you try to get in contact with as many high school coaches as you could. I like I said, I tried to go to the clinics and meet coaches, or if I went to someone's home, I would invite the coach, or if I went to the school, obviously you saw the coach, and the coach. It was interesting. Sometimes it was a little bit more difficult because in some of the schools, you had 3 different coaches for 3 different seasons.
Yeah, that's tough.
And sometimes the outdoor coach didn't really know much about, say, the cross country guy because they didn't coach during that season. But you tried to have the best, relationship you could with the coaches, and because they're going to be honest with you and tell you, what's good about a recruit, what's not going to be a good recruit. We were recruiting an athlete years back, and the high school coach said, listen, Mike, you don't want him on your team. You're very, very team oriented. I believed in big teams, and I believed I just believed in team spirit and big teams. And he said he's not like that. He wouldn't fit in with your team. So we didn't recruit him anymore, and the coach said that was a good idea, so coaches in that situation, and it was so long ago, I don't remember the coach's name, but I just remember the situation where it did help us. It did help us by speaking with the coaches and getting a feel for the athletes through the coaches.
So as you evolved in the recruiting process, how much did the influx of technology and be able to like see, on the internet, Kids Ran or social media or any of that, did that have any impact on how you recruited, or maybe some rule changes in the NCAA that allotted you more time to talk to certain individuals?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of my weaknesses, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, as you just saw just now, is I'm not as technologically, if that's the word, sound as other coaches may be out there. I I don't have a Twitter account. I'm not really good at a lot of that stuff. And heck, when you were in school, Dave, I used to send out the questionnaires and get them back in the mail. And now everything is done. Through questionnaires.
It's all digital.
It's all digital. You get them on your phone. Everything is on your phone or on your computers. And it helped in some respects because, heck, I could get on the bus on my way home from Boston, and I could look at all the results in the state on my phone on the bus, and you could double check. If I was recruiting Mike Mulqueen and Mike Mulqueen said he ran 154 for the 800, and I go on mile split and he's run 202.
Yeah. Well,
then you could verify things more quickly. With the internet. You could the rules have changed so drastically where now you can text kids. You can, it's pretty much open, free reign. And some of that stuff wasn't that prevalent for a lot of the years I was there. So the technology, it's just changed. It's just changed things immensely. Plus, what you can do too is if you're recruiting somebody, you can go on their social media and you can see what kind of things that they post. Are they posting, objectionable things? Are they posting things that might not fit in with your team or with your team values or whatever? And so it's opened up a whole different, and now I've been out of it 2 years. I'm sure it's even more prevalent now as more and more advanced technology gets. But it changed. I mean, just entering meets. You click on Direct Athletics and you enter a meet in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Wild. And it's wild, I just was looking at the Pole Short results and they had 498 athletes in one race. And, within a half an hour, 20 minutes, every time, and the school insignia, everything is on the internet.
And the splits are there too. And it's crazy. Yeah.
You don't have to hand in a stick anymore.
Yeah, no more popsicle sticks.
And then they add them up or rip off your card. All right.
But it did, Dave, to answer your question, it did change things drastically. And I don't, and not all for the good. For example, if you're a big time recruit, you don't want to be getting 50 texts all day from college coaches. And, you want to have a life. You want to be a normal high school senior or junior. And now the athletes are being recruited at such a younger age, that you can start much earlier, than you ever could before. I think you can start. I forget. You can start earlier. I don't know. I've been out a couple of years, but you can start recruiting earlier now than you could when I was there. And heck, talking to the softball coaches, they're looking at 8th graders.
Oh yeah,
crazy.
Absolutely.
But to answer your question, it changed a lot, and mostly for the good. But like I said, some of it might be, I don't know, like I said, if I'm 17, 18 years old and I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to college, and I'm being bombarded with texts and emails and all sorts of things, I mean, it could be a little overwhelming for high school juniors and seniors.
Yeah, we've actually had some high school athletes on, and just talking to them about the whole recruiting process, how you could take more official visits now than you could, in the past. But you can also take visits where you go to the school, but it's not considered an official visit. So it's really hard trying to figure out all the different dynamics of it. Where when I was going, it was like, all right, you had like 3 places that you could go, and then that was it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. When I was there before I retired, you could go on 5 official visits.
That's a
Now
lot.
I think I read somewhere where they might be trying to make that more.
Wow.
More than 5.
And that's crazy because it's like, that's a lot of official visits. Like that's a
Yeah.
lot to ask a kid, a lot to ask parents to do.
Mhm.
And, and it's really tough. So I kind of want to jump back a little bit because
Sure.
you talked about how sometimes the other sports, would help you in terms of like getting recruits and things with atmosphere. You go and you're into your final conference before you get done coaching at Rutgers. You're now jumping into the Big Ten, which is, one of the biggest conferences in the nation, right? And one of the most competitive.
And getting bigger.
No,
Getting bigger. And
it's like the Big 18 now or something.
Oh my
Yeah.
God. So what was it like? Because obviously Coach Shiano coming back was a big boost, but you also have Coach Peichel in men's basketball, Coach Goodall in wrestling. What was it like being able to, be around all those other coaches and talk to them and sharing the success? Because right now, Rutgers is doing really good, outside of like football's fighting and kicking and scratching to get there. But like every other sport has really acclimated to the Big Ten right now and competitive. I think, what was it? Women's soccer not too long ago was like, did really well in the Big Ten and competed nationally and things like that.
Field hockey's doing very well.
Field hockey. So what was that like to transition into the Big Ten? And did it get a little more intense and a little more pressure oriented? Like, hey, we're in the Big Ten now. We need to start seeing national competitive. Like, was there more pressure to recruit and get these higher level athletes and things like that as you entered in?
Well, I don't. Excuse me. I mean, in terms of feeling pressure as a coach, I didn't feel any pressure from the school. Like, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, but you tried to up your game the best you could, with trying to recruit the best athletes. But all the Big Ten schools are all doing the same thing. One of the things that I found that we were going against when we first joined the Big Ten was the tradition of all the other schools that were in the Big Ten. For example, we were in Minnesota at a Big Ten cross-country meet, and our women's volleyball team was playing the same weekend. So we took the team over, men's women's teams went over, to support the volleyball team. And it was like a basketball game. People were outside getting tickets, digital scoreboards, the whole, but I was looking around the gym, and there were banners, Big Ten wrestling champs, 1928. Things like this. So those schools had such a tradition, and they were so set in their ways, that you were kind of battling that a little bit too, it was. I never felt any pressure as a coach, but you did. Unfortunately, our office was in the rack. Steve Peichel was down the hall. I would see Steve, but unfortunately, Scotty Goodall was over at the college Ave gym. You wouldn't see Scott that much,
Yep.
And just the way the facilities were set up, But I did talk to Steve Peichel, when I could. He's such a charismatic personality. Football was in their own buildings, so you don't see them, unfortunately. Right. But I'll tell you a great thing.
He's doing such a good job with the basketball program there. They are so NCAA tournament team every year. That's the expectation. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what he did too. When he first came to Rutgers, he invited. He invited that spring, I believe it was. He invited all the head coaches to lunch at the Alumni Faculty Club. And I went over, and unfortunately, some coaches couldn't make it, but I went over, and a group of us were there. And he just wanted to talk to us. He just wanted to find out, how we recruited, or how we negotiated this, or what did you do here? Tell me about, because he was from Stony Brook, but he was really. We had a wonderful lunch, exchanging ideas, and it was kind of funny. He looks at me and he says, "Mike, how long have you been here?" And at the time, it was, I think, 34, 35 years. And I think I said 35. And he goes, "Oh man." Because I got to pick your brain. You've been here a long time. But, he would stop in the hallway, and hey, nice meet or whatever. And so you got to, you got to see and kind of feed off some of the other coaches the best you could, because unfortunately different facilities, like we'd see the soccer guys, but then they moved their offices when they got the new facility.
Yeah.
But, there was a genuine, if you saw them, how you doing, how you been, nice going or whatever. So there was a nice camaraderie there. When you were able to see them, which was really nice.
Yeah, definitely.
And a guy like Scott Goodall is such a charismatic guy, and a short conference guy, and Steve Peikel is like that. So they're really good, hardworking people.
That's awesome.
So go ahead, Dave.
I'm just curious because you started back in 1983.
Yeah.
At that point, I always felt like indoor track was not what it is now. Like, what was the evolution like of seeing the importance of indoor track with all these new like facilities, and now everyone has a bank track. So, what was it like seeing that evolution? Because I feel like teams ran indoor track then, but there wasn't as much of an emphasis as there might be now. Did you notice that as your coaching career went on?
Dave, I always liked indoor track.
Me too.
Being from the Northeast, it's always ingrained in you. Indoor track was its own, and I always looked at it. As, and a lot of people look at it, well, you're the track coach, but if you take, it's interesting. I always looked at it as 3 separate seasons. You have cross country, indoor and outdoor. And I didn't just use indoors to get guys ready for outdoors.
Right.
We're trying to win an indoor Big East championship, or we're trying to win an indoor IC championship. So those all, and you try to, peak them and getting ready for different championships. But over the years, I always took the indoors very, very seriously. You tried, of course. You tried not to over race guys. Like I remember one year, Balash Karani, the great half miler we had, I think he only ran 4 800s, before the outdoor season. I'd run him 1,000, I'd run him whatever, a 500. So you could pick and choose indoors like that, and then try to get everybody ready for like a Big East championship or an IC4A championship. But we're so unique because we have 3 separate championships.
Yeah.
In fact, it's interesting, if you take, when I first got out of college in 1976, when I retired, I coached 135 seasons.
Wow.
45 times 3.
Yeah.
Right.
Cross country, indoor and outdoor, and you say that, people, you guys understand it, but the layperson outdoor, you're just a track coach.
There isn't an off season. Because even in the summer now, you're recruiting, you're checking on your whole team, you're setting up all their summer plans and who's stayed here over the summer and what.
Yes.
It never ends. It never ends for a track coach.
Exactly. But you're absolutely right. You finish in the middle of June and you can start recruiting July 1st. At least the old rules might have been changed now. But no, Dave, to get your question too, I think what's changed a lot with indoors is with BU and with Harvard, and now the New Balance track, and now with the Armory and Reggie
Ocean
Lewis
Breeze
Center.
over there too. Ocean
The facilities. So a lot of, I told our kids, listen, you're going to run faster indoors.
Yeah.
Until the middle of April, end of April, until you get outside because of the weather in the Northeast and so on. And, you look at the times that people are running in Boston and a lot of our school records were set in Boston. Now they have this New Balance place. Yeah. So indoors, you could really get a lot done indoors, by going to those great facilities. You could load up a great 2-mile relay that might get you into the fast heated pen, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think with these tracks, and I think I think I just read where BU just resurfaced their track.
Yes. I think so. And I'm hoping that the New Balance place doesn't interfere with Terrier and Valentine, because you need the Terriers and the Valentines to have their big weekends. I hope they kind of stagger, because those are 2 classic meets that you go to run fast. You go there to run fast. You see a few pros. You see some special things over at those meets.
So how did when the bubble got built and you actually had a place to train indoors, how much did that help with training purposes, so you're not forced to go outside? It was
life changing. But I just want to say one other thing to get back to the other thing real quick is when you have all those great facilities and you can go through the IC4As right through the beginning of March, and with the weather in the Northeast what it is, sometimes with some of the athletes and some of the events, it was better to take advantage of the indoor season, because they might not get that same opportunity until maybe May. I mean, the Penn Relays could be horrible weather. You never know. Yeah. And then next thing you know, in the middle of May is your conference meet.
Yeah.
So it was important to try to get qualifying times and things indoors that could carry through to outdoors.
Yeah.
So I thought indoors was very, very important, but Dave, to answer your question, we were shoveling snow and snow blowers out there and we'd shovel, and you probably know it from your high school days. We shoveled 2 or 3 lanes.
Yep. You
Mr.
clear
O'Leary
up
had
the
us
3
shovel them all
lanes.
the time.
Yeah.
And then you shoveled a little square so it would melt so you'd have a place to warm up. I mean, we all did it, so having the bubble and being able to show recruits the bubble, 300 meter, 331 meter indoor track was a real change, and then we were able to convert it where we could have a couple of meets in there. Mm-hmm. And we had Army come in, we had Georgetown and Syracuse came in.
Nice.
We had some pretty good meets in there. We did. And we would line it and everything ourselves, but I mean on the infield we'd make a sprint straightaway with tape and stuff. But Dave, the bubble was one of the greatest things that ever happened to me as a college coach.
That's awesome.
Because you're there are times where we were running in the parking lots. We would make a big like number 7 over on the roads behind the soccer stadium because we couldn't get on the track. There was too much snow and they would plow the roads, and so you just made do. And then what we did back then is the sprinters and hurdlers when they pulled the stands out in the student section at the rack. Back then they had a floor where you could wear little tiny pin spikes with some type of a reverse floor. So we could go in the back corner and we could fit 5 hurdles, but you'd have to run under the stands. And we would go in after basketball practice. So I've got Elliot Quao, Eugene Norman, Forrest Prendergrass, Debbie Deutsch, Julie Smithers, some of the country's best athletes in there, and Lou Tomlinson. And we're training at 9:30 at night behind the rack because we had no place else to go. We would bring the high jump pits in and then take them. Danny Monchek, a 7-foot high jumper, is jumping at 10 o'clock at night, in the rack. So once the bubble came in, then all that changed, and it was a real lifesaver for us on many different levels.
It's funny because all those stories about all the different things you have to do in order to train if you don't have those facilities is all too common for like so many track programs around the country because we don't have a track at Marist. We don't have one at all. So it's like we had to go through the same thing where we're visiting, some other colleges closer to us were friendly enough to let us go train there and things like that. And it gets tough. And I don't think people realize at times just how difficult some track programs have it.
Yes.
So I want to jump over to, now you're post coaching right now. You're retired from that. Are you still involved with the sport?
Kind of yes and no. What I do is I still follow it obviously, and excuse me. But what I do now is I once I retired, I couldn't stay inactive and not do anything. I still run and walk every morning for an hour, and I'm too vain not to call it a run, but it's really slow. But I run, I walk I make sure I do it for an hour, but so what I do is I go a couple of times a week to St. Joe's Metuchen, where I went to high school, and I volunteer in their alumni relations office. Nice. So I work on alumni projects and reunions and different things, and it's a lot of fun. And then a couple of friends of mine are local high school coaches, so they asked me to come out and last year and look at some of their kids, and so I went to some practices and showed them some things. Not me personally showed them some things, but show them some workouts and different things to do. And I went to a couple of the high school meets to see how they did, and that was nice, and that was a lot of fun, But I'm reading a lot more. I got to the beach more, it's nice to have your weekends. It's nice to have your weekends free.
You haven't had a weekend in 30 years.
Lou Dusing, the legendary Cornell coach, he said to me one day, Mike, we're the only profession that works 5 days a week to prepare to work the weekend. Yeah.
So
true.
Yeah, it is so true. But and that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
So I got a call today from a buddy of mine, asking me, some advice with a kid, and so I nothing really serious, but I still follow it and still, my friends help out if they need it. And it's just enough. It's good. And getting a break after 45 years is good.
And, like when you're coaching 3 seasons in the summer, people don't realize the amount of time or that it can have on the coaches' families. Like you have to miss a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because of a commitment that you make to coach. It's not like where you just coach one season. You're coaching all year. So like,
oh yeah,
that had to be a big adjustment too. Like having all this time, to spend time with your family and friends. So
yeah, I tried. That's a great question, Dave. Too. That's a good point. And I tried my best. Like I remember my son was running in high school and he was getting a big award. So I talked to the coaches and I flew home a day earlier from the NCAAs. I had great assistant coaches and I flew home a day early because I didn't want to miss him getting this award. It's kind of funny. We won the IC4A outdoor meet at Princeton one year. My daughter had a dance recital. So I told my staff, listen, as soon as we're done, win, lose, or draw, I'm going to jump in the van. And I parked the van right near the door. And I rushed home and I sat down just as her show was coming on. So you try, and I've told a lot of younger coaches that do everything you can to try to miss as little as you can, because the next thing you know, I mean, my kids are 33, 29, and 27.
Wow.
And I see you have 2 cute little girls, Dave. I see your pictures out there.
Yeah.
And I always tried the best. I mean, I took my boys when they were younger. I took them in the Navy with me. I took them with me to Virginia to see the meet and be on the bus. And they got a excuse me, they got a big kick out of it. But you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you a funny story. We just had our 36th wedding anniversary, and we were married August 22nd. And I remember we were on our honeymoon in Sanibel Island in Florida, and we were sitting on the beach reading or something, and I had excused myself. I had to go back to the hotel room and call Rutgers because 2 of the kids had problems with their housing. And I'm on my honeymoon, and I'm working on housing. But that's what you had to do.
Yeah.
Because you're always on call all the time, especially coaching 3 seasons.
Yeah. You and your wife got married on my brother's birthday, so it's a good day.
Oh, is that right?
Good day.
Yeah, there you go.
Before we jump out of here, I want to ask you the same question that we ask all of our guests, the last thing we ask them. Obviously, we know track and field is not the most watched sport. It's an extremely popular sport. People love running. People love athletics. But in terms of, getting a lot of casual eyes on it, USATF, for lack of better terms, does not do a very good job of, getting a lot of popularity. If you could change something about this sport that you think would make it for the better for all the athletes and people involved to maybe get some money, to get some notoriety, what would you change?
Oh, wow.
And after 45 years, you probably have a lot of ideas.
I think, oh gosh, that's a really good question.
That's how we close out every episode.
What were some of the other answers?
Well, I know Sarah Slattery said, we should put it on DraftKings and have gambling and be able to bet on it,
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Or just having a league here in the States make sure that the athletes have to commit to running in multiple events, because a lot of problem falls on the USATF, but a lot of it falls on, there's a lot of athletes that are,
there's no contracts or anything. And David Verberg, great sprinter, said, have sprinting events, have events, because people love sprinters, have events where it's sprints only too, to get some eyes there as well, to make track bigger. So we've had a lot of really good ideas, to be quite honest, and I'm going to compile them at some point.
I think haven't they tried it? Didn't they have that league they tried to form in the States a few years back?
They had Tracktown for a little bit now.
American Track League, the ATL.
Yeah. It's still going on. ATL still doing its thing.
And they tried with the World Relays, but I don't think they have any distance races anymore in the World Relays.
Don't think so.
I think
I'm not sure.
I think and it's interesting too. You for example, even a meet like the Penn Relays, a lot of schools don't come anymore. They go to different, unfortunately, because Penn does such a wonderful job. Yeah. But I think USA Track and Field. I don't know if it's just them. I think maybe maybe having, more college meets where you open up, like you said, you have, try to get the students involved more, or you have, in terms of the professional, because that's who they want to see. But you brought up a good point. Unfortunately, in our sport, you might go to a meet, and some of the best stars are not competing.
Yeah.
It'd be like going to a Yankee game and judging is not playing, and you want to see him play. So if there was a way that you could lock in maybe some with some contracts, or like you said, some prize money and things, or more prize money. I was reading where a lot of the athletes had problems with this year's national meet in Oregon because it was so expensive to get there.
Yeah.
And they're having it there next year too. And there's a lot of athletes that are like, can we have somewhere else? I mean, it's a great place, but getting there is expensive. And then, the local places drive up the price so much for nightly rent and everything. So having more track and field only facilities that maybe are not at, why not have the meet at Icahn Stadium? But there's not many outdoor only facilities here in the States that are not at a college or not at somewhere else that can have. I mean, indoor track is different, that there's millions of them.
Yeah.
But outdoor track,
you mentioned Icahn Stadium. It's a great place for me. It's difficult to get to.
That's the issue. It's hard to get to.
Very difficult to get to. I was going to go to the meet this year, and I said, do I really want to go over the Triborough Bridge and find a place to park and beat the traffic? And so I was guilty of it. I watched it on TV. I think it was a lousy day, but I watched it on TV.
Yeah.
But it's kind of ironic too, because the most participants in high school sports are track and field and cross country.
Without a doubt.
If I remember the statistic correctly, I think the most kids competing in sports on the high school level, I think, is track or it might be second. It might be second. So there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to somehow. And I'm not doing a very good job answering your last question.
No, you are.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's tough. It's not an easy question.
It's not an easy question, but I think you have to somehow market. You have to somehow market your. Hey, bring Taylor Swift to every track meet.
No, get her out of sports. She was at my Jets game, and that's all it was about until Zach Wilson played well.
Oh my God.
But there's so many things, and a lot of it has to stem with, like most other athletes in every other sport, that can be their main way to take care of their family. And unless you're in the top 1 or 2% of track, it's very difficult. Like we've had guests on
Eric
Sawinski have regular jobs, who are top level national people who are running the Olympics. That there has to be some better way. And we've had so many great suggestions, but
I mean, we had Adam Vest. Adam Vest really is trying to reach out to the youth in where is he right now? In Connecticut, Massachusetts. And that's actually a good point. We've heard a few people say we don't have any young leagues. There's football leagues, there's basketball leagues, there's baseball leagues, there's little league and all this. There is no young track league nationally or regionally to galvanize youth from a young age to start enjoying the sport. So there's so many ideas. There really is.
Yeah,
we could have a whole podcast probably about ideas.
Yeah, and you have some really big names out there that are great people that you could really, really market. I mean, I live in Denellen. So Sidney McLaughlin, I could walk to Sydney's house from my house.
Yeah. Maybe you could do that. Tell Sid to come on the show.
We knew her. She's in LA now, but we knew her since she was just a little girl. But you've got Sydney. You've got obviously Noah Lyles. You've got Yared Nagoosh. You've got a lot of these guys.
We had Clayton Murphy on the show. Clayton Murphy does workouts at different high schools all the time, and he meets fans all the time.
Yeah, if you could market them somehow, get them out into the public, and I think I just saw when it was Noah Lyles at the Jet game last night.
He was at the Jet game last night. Yes.
Yeah.
He walked out on the field with his gold medals. He sat down with the ESPN crew, so that was good to see. That can really help.
Noah's doing the best right now. Noah and Sha'Carri are really marketing themselves. Sha'Carri Richardson's doing a really nice job. They're both marketing themselves better than anybody in the sport without having big major deals that put them on commercials. They're making themselves the story, which I love.
And you've got Anna Hall, great heptathlete.
Anna's amazing.
Awesome.
You've got her. You've got Krauser and Joe Kovacs in the shot.
Yeah,
two real dynamic personalities. You've got some really good people out there that if
Mondo
you could get them in
Duplantis and pole vault,
Pardon me?
Mondo Duplantis.
Yeah,
he's so
Sam
good.
Kendricks and these guys. I mean, you've got so many people out there. If you could market them and make them more mainstream than just every 4 years, that could somehow. Again, I don't have the exact answer, but if you can somehow, hey, these people are to track and field what Kevin Durant is to the NBA.
Absolutely.
They're the same. They're the same caliber, just in a different sport.
100%.
So if you could somehow market them or get the general public, to my neighbor. It's kind of funny. My neighbors will see me running in out neighborhood. Oh, you getting ready for the marathon? Things like this, and people don't understand. They don't understand the sport. And if you could somehow market these people and get them out into the public eye, and somehow, explain the general public to watch a Mondo pole vault would be awestruck watching what he does, or Krauser, or these Grant Holloway or Rai Benjamin.
Yeah,
There's such terrific athletes. I'm curious, what did by the way, you guys have had some I've watched some of your podcasts.
Appreciate
You've had some phenomenal talent on your.
It's
I was really
included,
flattered.
Coach.
I was
You
really
included.
I was really flattered you asked me. You've had some big timers on here. But what was like Eric Sawinski? What was his answer to it?
Well,
Eric wanted to be able to get small sponsors to be able to put on the back of his jersey and keep the front clean, because he said if he was allowed to get small sponsors in town, people that know who he is, he could easily get a few $1,000s more in sponsorships for each meet, that as long as he could put on the back of his singlet. And that was his, and I thought that's a cool answer. Basically be like NASCAR. They could kind of NASCAR themselves, keep the front of the jerseys clean or singlets clean, the back of the singlets with your sponsors. I thought that was a pretty cool answer.
That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah, I was just curious because obviously he's one of the big names out there, and he's a great pace setter now. But he was great.
God.
He was
best
great
in the world.
He was great before he was a pace setter.
Absolutely.
And, I was just curious, what was Clayton Murphy's? What was his idea?
He was big on just the athletes have to show up. They have to if they commit to a meet.
That episode was fresh after Sid dropped out of the LA Grand Prix, and he was fired up.
Oh, no.
Because he was going there and he's like, we need the top athletes to compete here.
I tell you, he always shows up.
He brings
Murphy
it.
does.
He races.
He brings it.
He races a lot.
Yeah.
He races a really lot. But I didn't do a great job answering your last question.
No, you did fantastic, Coach. Did fantastic.
It's a very complex question. It's because there's so many variables, and it's just because we always call ourselves track nerds, and we just want to see this sport be as big as it can, because there's so many, there's no reason why these stars like Noah Lyles can't be as big as Kevin Durant or those guys, because he's that good. But I feel a lot of it too is there's a lot of cross relationships from athletes, like basketball players support NBA support NFL players. You don't really see a lot of those other sports coming and talking about what Noah Lyles did winning 3 gold medals.
And I think back at guys like Karani James, Johan Blake. These guys, they should be millionaires in their countries. They shouldn't, especially a guy like Karani James. All he does is medal. But I guarantee that he's still, I don't know Karani James' financial situation. I know he's a star over in his country, but this isn't a profitable sport, just out of just doing the job itself. So, I mean, there's so many people that we just see at every meet. At all big meets and things.
Were you guys in the stands at the Penn Relays when Usain Bolt came to run?
I was there. Yes,
I was not.
It was electric in that stadium when he ran. He ran the 4x1 to Jamaica. It was electric.
Yeah.
You need personalities like him.
And Noah's doing a great job filling.
Noah's doing a great job. Yes.
Usain Bolt though was one of those guys that crossed over because he was on commercials for ESPN. He was one of those guys.
And he ran a 4.2 at the Super Bowl in jeans and snake shoes. He's insane.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
But all right, Coach. Really appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks,
this was lots of fun picking your brain, hearing your stories.
Did I do okay? How did I do?
You
Wonderful.
did fantastic, Coach. That was awesome. So once again, he's Mike Mulqueen. He's the former and now retired head track and field and cross country coach from Rutgers. Obviously has a ton of stories. We could probably fill, 10 podcasts with the stories that he has over 45 years. But so Coach, before we jump out of here, is there anything that you want to talk about, anything that you want to maybe plug that you're doing or not doing, or are you just enjoying retirement?
No, I'm enjoying it. I'm like I said, I'm reading, I'm going to the beach. I'm trying to play golf a little bit. I'm very bad, but I enjoy it.
It's fun.
It's fun. I'm not good, but it's fun. And I'm volunteering at the high school, so I'm keeping really busy. I still follow track.
Great.
And I always will. Obviously, it's in my blood. But I just really appreciate you guys having me come on. And like I said, I've watched some of yours, and I think you guys do those golf clubs in the back there.
Yep, I got some golf clubs in the back. I golf but I golf.
But I think you guys do a great job. And I was telling Dave, I was talking earlier before we went on the air, that it's really nice to see, Chris and Adam and Wilfredo and Sean and, all those guys doing so well coaching. It's really nice to see. It's interesting watching Sean and Chris bang it out right now with CBA and Westfield. Being able to have had them at Rutgers, I'm really proud of what they're doing. And I said, you guys are doing a wonderful job.
Yeah,
what you guys are doing is great for the sport.
Appreciate it. That's what we're trying to
do. We had one episode we called it the Coaches Roundtable, and it was all of them.
Oval table, Dave. The
oval table, sorry.
Table.
It was like Chris, Sean,
I forgot Geiger.
Yeah. Scott Baker, Geiger, Will, and Adam Alvin. We all had them on. We had them all on at the same time just to kind of talk coaching stuff.
I saw that. I forgot Geiger's doing a great job coaching down Lacey.
Awesome too.
He is.
Fantastic.
He was quite a success story at Rutgers.
Oh, he was amazing.
He came in kind of behind Chris Greer because he ran like 157 at South, and
funny part is he won the Ocean Championship in a year that had Paul Smith, Matt Kowinski, and Chris Greer, and he ended up winning because Chris was like just trying to get second with Steve, and the North kids ran some other meet, and they didn't go to Canada. So he was Ocean champ with like a 150 kid, a 153 kid, a 154 kid, and he was Ocean champ.
And then he came to Rutgers, and he was in the top 7 in cross country. He just worked so hard. Then he was an IC40 champ. He was a Big East champ. I'll tell you, he anchored a Big East 2-mile relay at Villanova, and he took the lead, if I remember correctly, about a quarter mile, right, with about a quarter to go. And I said, oh my God, he went too early. And I think we won by 2 or 3 tenths of a second. And he was just so tough. Yes, and then he scored in the IC4As as an individual. And he had a really good career at Rutgers. He was tough.
He's
from the 500 right on through the 8.
He's one of my best friends since freshman year of high school. Yep.
Yeah. He did, like I said, and Chris had a great career too. And until he got knocked down at that Big East championship.
Oh, don't get started. He was winning that meet hands down.
Yes.
He was, because he could run. I'm like, all right. I'm like, it's him. It's Dan Wilson. Chris is going wide. I'm like, he's got this. 100 minutes ago, I'm like, he's got this. And then he got tripped up. I'm like, no.
Because Chris went down and the Georgetown kid went down too. And Coach Gag and I were just livid. I thought Chris came around the turn. I said, he's going to win. He's got it.
There was no doubt in my mind. I was there watching as a spectator. I'm like,
because but I was happy to see Chris have a great post-collegiate with the Nike farm team.
Ran a 340 in the 15.
Yeah, it was terrific. And now he's a lawyer now, right?
I believe so. I haven't talked to Chris in a while, but I know he's doing well.
I think he's a lawyer. Yeah. I saw him at a high school meet down at Egg Harbor a few years back. I think he was in law school or becoming a lawyer. Yeah, but Geiger, man, he was one of my favorites. He was tough. He was tough.
It's always good to hear.
Dave, what year before you go? What years were you there? I forget.
I graduated high school in 96, and then I went to East Stroudsburg, and then I came there fall of 98. So I think 98, yeah.
Right, okay, got it. Okay.
All right, so Dave, anything you want to add in before we jump on out of here?
I mean, it's obviously wonderful having on Coach. I didn't run for him long, but I have so many friends who just have such fond memories of college and running there, and to see how many kids that he's coached having such success now is just, it's an attribute to him, and what a service he provided for this state and for that university for all those years. So thank you, Coach.
Well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Yep. And, it was my pleasure. Like I said, I always love talking to collegiate coaches. It gives such a good perspective. And especially, coming from, the state school in New Jersey and Rutgers, like it's always good. And, the way that you were able to carry that program, bring it to new heights and leave it in the place that it is now, 2 years later, they're soaring. Rutgers is in a fantastic position, and large part to you and your service that you did there 40 years. So really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it very much. I really enjoyed this. And keep, you guys are doing a great job. Keep it going.
We don't plan on stopping. And with that, so if you like what you guys heard, like, share, follow, subscribe, rate 5 stars, Spotify and iTunes. Spread this word of mouth. Go find us on the socials. Go just search Talking in Ovals. And we will be back next week with another episode. So long, everybody.